Всем привет! Мы снова с вами, и сейчас у нас замечательный гость. Это Роберто Зимановски, он был профессором в университете Базеля. Сейчас он позиционирует себя как медиа-исследователь, исследователь цифровых практик и культурных практик. У него сегодня будет замечательная лекция по поводу Фейсбука и общества Фейсбука. Вот, собственно, выглядит вот так книга. Пока ее нет на русском языке, но ее можно приобрести в том числе в цифровом виде. И совершенно новая Waste the New Media Primer книжка буквально вот недавно вышла, тоже рекомендуем. Сейчас познакомимся поближе с нашим гостем, господин Роберто Зимановски. Hello.
Добрый день.
Добрый день. Let's talk about your lecture today. You will speak about your book. It's called Facebook Society. Yes. What the main thesis, main ideas, main points of that? Could you tell it? Maybe shortly, or well, maybe wider as you want.
That's very difficult because it took me an entire book to make clear my points. Let's say I have 3 chapters and 3 main points in this. First, I talk about our need to always represent ourselves on Facebook, and why we do this, and to what extent this is a narcissistic obsession, or, as I say, it is actually an escape from reality, from the present time. It's a cry for help and not a narcissistic obsession. Although it's difficult to separate both. The second chapter is called Automated Autobiography, and here I discuss from the perspective of a scholar of literature, which I am.
Yes.
I discuss the narrative aspect of presenting yourself on Facebook. So how do we narrate our life, and how is that different from narrating our life in a diary? And the difference is, and I call this a photographic narration, not only because there are more photos, obviously, on Facebook than in a diary, in a traditional diary, but also because we document our life like with the camera, like something we do when we take a picture, rather than thinking about what is actually important and then describing only those things that are important. That's the difference between describing something and taking a picture.
Of course.
If you take a picture, everything is on the picture, no matter whether it's important or not. And I'm making the point that this is how we describe our life nowadays.
Yes.
And that is the second chapter, and the third chapter is on online nation. Here I ask whether Facebook or any social networks can create a nation or a community, because Mark Zuckerberg always talks about Facebook as our community, in singular, our community. And you wonder, well, can a platform, can a technology really create a community above all other borderlines, like language or culture or
like
ideology.
New state, virtual state.
Exactly. And there have been people in the early 90s already that talked about the internet as and that it is creating the digital citizen and the online nation. And I discussed this with respect to Jean Nancy, the French philosopher who has an interesting concept of community in the late 1990s. He developed this and was very popular back then. And this is a community that is based on nothing than sharing. There's no ground, there's no language, there are no shared values, there's no shared history. He imagines a community that is only a community because it is you are with the other. And you are with the other not on ground of some shared values, but because you share your being.
It's like post-Cartesian ethics, yes?
You could
sharing or posting means existing.
Yes, maybe. I post, therefore I am, you could say. Although I make the point in my book that the more accurate adaptation of Descartes' famous sentence is, it posts. and therefore I am. Because that's the point in automatic autobiography. The postings is more, I'm not really the subject of it. It's my life that describes itself. Yeah, so this is maybe very short. It was not too short. No?
That's great. I want to ask about your research. It was cyberspace and literature. What you discover, what surprised you when you try to connect that spaces, that fields? Maybe you found something that surprised you.
Well, the reason I came up with this research concept back in 1997 was that I wanted to know how literature develops when it marries with new technology. I was very interested back then, and people talked a lot about virtual reality, and I wondered how that will play out in literature. So the title of my research concept was quite open. It was because I called it cyberspace and literature. And I left it open whether the subject is actually cyberspace in literature or literature
in cyberspace.
I realized then that the cyberspace in literature is basically only important in books for younger adults, for youth and kids. And otherwise it was not really a topic, but I saw that there are some experiments with literature in cyberspace, in digital media, and so I got more interested in these experiments, and I realized that there is a history of such kind of experiments, like non-linear writing. You have Cortázar, who experimented with this in the 60s, and also combinatoric literature. You have also this with the Queneau, the Oulipo
multimedia
group, and also multimedia. You have this experiments also before, when you mix text with visuals, concrete poetry or visual poetry. And so I investigated this, and that was then my interest for the next years. And then I published some years later, in 2002, I published a monograph on that topic. And then later I moved on from there to art, because it was not mostly, this was not really literature anymore.
I just want to ask it, what do you think about new actual literature? Is it literature, or it's kind of art, kind of multimedia art, kind of happening maybe? Yes, well, it's online, it's today, it's now. We can make it worldwide just now, or just moving with other people. It's great, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you have several aspects here. You have just the sociological aspect of literature. You can share your poems with others. You can write them together with others, and that's more the sociological aspect. The aesthetic aspect is more like in concrete poetry, when you have words, but you present them in a way that the form of the way of presentation adds meaning to what the words say. So you have this spatial realm as an additional level of meaning, in addition to the linguistic level. Yes, and therefore it is more than just literature. That's by definition, digital literature is not just literature. I mean, there is of course just literature on the internet. But that I call digitized literature. If you put a novel on the internet, that doesn't make it different, doesn't make it digital literature. Digital literature for me is something that makes use of the technical features in an aesthetic way. And if you just put a novel on the internet and you read it then there on the screen, that doesn't make use in an aesthetic way of the internet. It makes use in a sociological way, because it distributes the text in a different way.
Okay, about your next book, in 2014 you have a book. I don't know how to spell it in Deutsch. Yes, but when I translate it from Russian to English, it becomes like dump media. But you said it's more silent media, not dump.
Oh.
What do you think? The difference between this?
That is not 2014. That just came out in 2014. I had a book which was called Data Love.
Data Love.
And it was called Data Love also in German.
It's in you. Sorry, it was.
You want to talk about Data Love or about?
About dump media. Yes.
Now
it's your new. It's your actual.
The new book. Yeah, this came out this year in 2018 in April, and the title is probably translated silence media or mute media, which of course is counterintuitive because new media are everywhere.
Yes.
They are ubiquitous. So how can you say they are silent? My point is that they are everywhere, but we don't talk enough about them. We don't talk about the cultural consequences of the new technology. We use the new technology, and that is even true in those fields where you would expect people to discuss new phenomena like new media the most. University and schools.
Yeah.
But if you look at schools, what they do in terms of media literacy, at least in the fields that I know in Germany and in the United States, I don't know how that is in Russia, but there people learn how to open an app, how to program an algorithm.
Just to operate, not to think. Yes.
Yeah, and how to navigate the highway, the data highway. But they don't learn to discuss the consequences of an algorithm, the cultural consequences. What does it mean if we get our news and our information filtered by an algorithm, or if we filter human behavior with an algorithm?
Yes.
The quantification. If the numbers replace the evaluation, the linguistic evaluation. If we don't comment on something anymore, but just look at the numbers, the views, and then we rate something, the value of something according to the numbers. So what does that mean? How does that change society? And that is what I want to be more discussed in universities, to be more researched. And then also to be discussed in schools, so that we prepare ourselves for the culture that these new technologies bring with them.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic about technologies and human being? Because I think now there is no technologies without ethics. I mean, for people, it's very important to connect technologies with ethics and think about it more and more clear and more and more harder. Because as you know, MIT 3 years ago makes research. I will tell you about it. Maybe you know, of course. Yes, it was research. Oh yes, moral machine. You need to choose how.
I know.
How.
13,
how to
13
operate.
examples.
Yes, 13 examples. Yes, what do you think? I think it's great. I think it's a good direction. But in other situation, we don't know who will program that algorithm. Yes, what he wants, what his ethics, what his aims. Yes, I don't know. And as you know, in China now. Social rating, it's going more and more, and so it's like Black Mirror. Yes,
it is, and that is a very complex question that you bring up now. Let me maybe start with the pessimism, especially since I am sometimes considered to be a cultural pessimist, which I don't know. Sometimes I think you just have to wait a little bit longer, and then your pessimism turns just into realism.
Realism, yes.
Because now it's even people in the Silicon Valley, the so-called whistleblower from the Silicon Valley, are very pessimistic or very critical, to say so, very critical about their own inventions. So those people who have invented the like button.
It's like nuclear weapon, yes?
Well, exactly. There it was similar, Oppenheimer, no?
Oppenheimer,
who then regretted their inventions. And so if you wait a little bit longer, you see that now more and more people see the need for a discussion of these things. And not only 10 years after they invented the like button, but maybe now with respect to the artificial intelligence, the moral machine is about artificial intelligence behind the wheel in your car, in your autonomous car, and aims at the question, well, who should die in an accident? Where do you drive, no? With the car?
Old people, young people, animals or people.
So it is, to that extent, it is good that these questions are raised now before the autonomous cars are populating our streets. And to that extent, I'm at the end optimistic again that there will be this discussion. Now, coming back to the moral machine and the issue here, this is a very interesting example because it shows us how technology, new technology, and the new questions this technology raises urges us for to find answers, not new answers to old questions, but answers to new questions. Because there was not, I mean, there is this famous trolley dilemma in philosophy.
It's like,
where you have a streetcar, a trolley that goes down the rail, and there are 5 people, it will kill them. The car is out of control, and you can change the direction, and then there's only one person, but you have actively to do this. And so according to the German ethics and how it is inscribed in the constitution in Germany, you are not allowed to kill this one person deliberately in order to save these 5 people. You are not, because, and this is the deontological concept of ethic, and that goes back to Immanuel Kant, you cannot reduce the life of a human being to a means to save other people's life.
How to do in this situation? You just don't touch it?
Yes.
And just waiting?
Yes. Well, there is of course an opposition. That's the consequentialistic ethic that says, well, at the end, it's the number is more important. So if I kill one person, but I can save 5 lives, then I should do this. So this is the output, the outcome is more important in this case, and that's more in the tradition of Great Britain and also the US. That's why MIT has such examples, such experiments, rather than in Germany. In Germany, more important is the urge, or how do you say, the imperative not to kill is more important than the imperative to save life. So if you kill this one person deliberately, then you kill the person. You save 4 people's life, in contrast. But you have killed deliberately one person. And the imperative not to kill in this ethic is more important than the other one. But we see now with the algorithm behind the and in the car, so far, if you run into an accident, you make your own decision what you do, where you drive the car, and whether you kill yourself by driving against the wall, or you kill the kid on the street, or you kill a group of adults or older people. And you make this decision only when it comes to it. And it's not really an ethical decision to that extent. It's a spontaneous reaction. But if you have an algorithm, you have to program it before.
It's programmed by people.
And that means by cold blood,
Yes.
you have to make a decision who should die in such a case.
Yes.
And this decision was, before it was just a theoretical decision, like the trolley dilemma. Now it becomes practical. And this is, therefore it's a good example how new technology urges us to find questions for answers that were not really important, to find answers for questions that were not really important before, but that are important now. I think the MIT example shows it, and also how people react to it. There's also an experiment in Germany. There's a famous play. It's called, by Ferdinand von Schirach, it's called Terror. And in this play, a soldier shoots an airplane which is captured by a terrorist. And the terrorist threatens to bring the airplane down into a stadium filled with 70,000 people.
Yes.
And the airplane has only 164 people.
Yes.
So this officer decides to shoot the airplane and kill the 164 innocent people in order to save the 70,000.
Yes.
And the play is presented in Germany in theaters in a way that the audience then, so it's like a trial. The officer now is on trial because he was not allowed to do so. The order from his upper officer was not to shoot up the airplane, but he did it. So now he's on trial, and the audience in the theater is the jury. They have to decide whether this officer is guilty or not. Most people in the theater audiences, and also on TV, it was also shown on TV, and then you could also call in and say guilty or not. Most people said he's not guilty. So that means most people in Germany
who become live after that.
That means in Germany, most people now move from the deontological ethic, you should not kill, even if you save more life, to the consequential list ethic, you can kill if you save more life. So more people think this way now, and that is, if you go this way of, it's called empirical ethics, if you ask the people what they think, rather than philosophers thinking about it, I think we witness a movement to this more utilitarian perspective, that, okay, we kill the lower number of people, so we save more. So there's a lot of things going on with in connection with this new technology, also in the ethical and philosophical world.
And the next question, continuing this idea, what do you think? Maybe actual literature, is the role of actual literature to speak with audience, to mass audience about that problems, like Dostoevsky speaks about ethics problems in 19th century. Now maybe it's time to literature now.
Yes, but I wouldn't say that it's the natural subject of digital literature. Digital literature is not about digital media. It uses digital media as an aesthetic means.
Yes.
So of course it can still talk about digital topics, but we can also use traditional literature, which is linear, written by one person, that discusses these issues. But yes, I do think that it needs to be discussed. I said before, we need a discussion in school and university, and that means also we need a discussion in society, and that and part of this is of course also fiction literature that has the capacity and the freedom to imagine and fantasize about possible consequences.
What do you think? Lots of TV video serials becomes more popular than literature. Can we become literature great again? In digitized maybe.
Well, that raises the question of the cultural consequences of digital technology. Well, there are concerns that we lose the ability to read books, to concentrate on books. There's this book by Nicholas Carr, The Shallows, where he explains it. He is my age, so he's socialized still with the book, with the book culture. But even he, when he reads a book now, not on the screen, just the book, after 20 minutes he gets nervous and he wants to do something because he spends so much time on the screen, and there every moment something happens. So we get used to this kind of multitasking, processing of different information. And while we read something, we also have emails coming in. And it shows me on the screen there's an email, and I look and I read it for a moment, and in this moment I'm out of the world, the fictional world, or wherever I was, the intelligent, the word that this text that I just read draw me in, and the fear is that we lose this ability because some neuroscientists say that you have to create your brain in a way. It's not, you are not born with this capacity to concentrate on a book and read. You have to create this in your youth, and if you don't do this, then you may not be able to do it later. And if that is true, then of course I would say we should not put computers in first grade classes, but first make sure that the kids have developed this capacity to concentrate on a book and read and also listen to a talk longer than just 5 minutes. And after that, later in their school time, then they should move on to computers. Because I think the book is more difficult to learn. The computers is always fine. It's always kind of gamification.
Yes.
So there's no fear in my mind. There's no fear that the kids may not pick up the cultural technique of computer. So it's no. There's later. There's no need to confront them with it as early as possible. But there is the fear that they will not pick up the cultural technique of reading if they never learned it in the time, during the time when they actually are very into reading. You remember when you started reading kids' books and then later adult books.
And it's like evolution. Yes, a kid need to make some evolution.
Exactly.
From primitive to more complicated.
And I see, to come back to your question, I see a problem if you don't do this, and I see the school here has the duty to pass on this technology, this technique, this cultural technique of reading to the next generation. If they don't do so, if they only pass on information to the next generation, but not this quality of this cultural technique, then they have not met their task or their what's the word I'm looking for? They have not fulfilled their duty.
To connection to that ideas, I want to ask you about your studenthood. How it was without digital, and when you realize that you're interested in digital and you become to marry, as you say, that two fields.
Yes. Well, of course, as a scholar of literature, I read a lot of books. And the computer came quite late into my life. Only when I wrote my dissertation, I had a computer. So before I had a typewriter.
Or like typewriter, yes.
So I had still to think about what I want to write before I start writing. I had to make a concept, because if I have to rewrite, it was a lot of work.
Yes.
Now with copy and paste, it's very easy, so you just start, and I love it. I love to just start writing and then I change, and it's also easy. And I develop, now I develop my thinking while writing. Before I had to think before I wrote. And I like this change. I don't think that is too bad. But of course, there's a danger that that we then get impressed by our own writings. We just do something, write something, we format it in a nice way, so it almost looks like printed, and then we get impressed by our own writing and don't see how shallow it may be. So you have to be able to be skeptical to your own production and to rethink what you have written before you give it to the public eye, no? And that of course is not the case anymore with the internet, where you write and it's published just a second later. So that's a huge difference from my time back then to today. The other difference is, and that is, it's the same issue, the gatekeeper is gone. So I had to learn a certain ways of discussion. I had to have a certain discipline. And I also had to learn certain vocabulary. So how you talk about things in the academic realm. Before I was allowed to participate. You know, Foucault calls this the discourse police in his short text, The Order of Discourse, and it is a kind of police. Yeah, you develop a certain way of thinking about things before you can participate. It's a kind of disciplination. And it's good if you can undermine this, as Foucault, for example, did. But and now we can all, because nobody asked me. There are no gatekeepers anymore who say, well, first you have to learn the right vocabulary and the right way how we think about things before you can access the public eye. Now I can access the public eye whenever I want. And then if I create for myself enough attention, I may be more important than a professor who has gone this way and then published a book and has maybe 100 readers, and I have 1,000 followers. No? But the downside here is that I'm also, with the gatekeeper, also with the discourse discipline, I also miss the self-discipline in thinking. So I don't need to really understand something when it becomes difficult, because I can still publish. And then I just publish what I understand. And that was not the case before. So if I didn't understand Foucault, I couldn't talk about him. I would not have been allowed. And of course, there are also always political reasons why I'm not allowed. But there's also an academic standard that disallows those who have no idea what they are talking about. Now you can talk whenever you want. So without this self-discipline. And that is a problem, together with this mentality of instant gratification that the internet fosters. No? That I always want something now. And if something, and that in terms of academic life, to come back to my studenthood, if something becomes difficult, while I click and go and look what's going on my Facebook account, it's more interesting, it's more fun. You know?
It's fun.
That was not the case before. I was in the library with the book. If it became difficult, I just had to sit there and sit through this until I understood. And then it was not difficult anymore. Now, if it becomes difficult, you go and look what's going on Facebook, and then you never take the next step to understand.
No pain, no gain.
Exactly. So we know it in sport, no? But in the academic realm, in the discourse realm, it's now different, which is also why we have so much hate speech and so much such a low quality of discourse, because people don't have this discipline anymore to think about what they want to say before they say it.
Maybe it's about ethics, digital ethics too.
Yes.
Mass ethics.
No, it is ethics, but that is
rules,
an ethic.
Ethics.
That's an ethic that you cannot blame anybody for this. It's the disposition of the technology. So, and we need to understand that the technology, because there is a hyperlink structure and there's always a link to something which is more interesting, because of this, it fosters this mentality of instant gratification. And that, of course, undermines the self-discipline, this culture of self-discipline. So we have to understand this. There's nobody to blame. But as a media philosopher, you understand that sometimes the medium has its own message. That's a famous saying by Marshall McLuhan,
of course.
And that the medium imposes its own rules on the clueless users. So we have to understand the consequences of this, even if there's no subject, no person behind it who wants to manipulate us.
What do you think if you will start learning now? For example, you are now 20. What field do you prefer to choose? You start from literature as many years, or maybe you take some data science or something else? I mean, for young people now, what is preferable? Or maybe it's good to start from thinking, from literature, and then become digitized.
Well,
what do you think?
I would agree to your suggestion. I would actually indeed be interested in data science today. I would learn programming and to understand more about the inner world of algorithms. But many people do this, and what they are lacking is the philosophical background. And that is a problem, I think, because then they're very naive in what they can do and what they are doing by writing programs. And if you talk about an ethics, for example, for engineers, so that at the end Mark Zuckerberg doesn't sit there in front of the Senate in the hearing and he says, oh, it's so complex, Facebook, we didn't know. We only learn now.
It's like black box, we don't know.
So if you, and that's an irresponsible position. You have to think about what you're doing, and if you have such an impact on society everywhere in the world, on 2 billion or more people, you have to think about it. And for this, you need a broader horizon. And where do you get this? Well, probably not in computer science. You probably get it in the humanities. So therefore you need philosophy, literature, which is always about human issues, because it touches on human issues. I said we need to discuss the cultural consequences of technology. That means the consequences for people.
For their values.
And how do you judge this? Well, you have to know how people work. And where do you learn this? For example, in literary studies, but also in sociology. So all fields in the humanities are important, but I would combine it with data science, computer science, so that I can really have an impact. Otherwise, the humanities probably are not the most important faculty anymore, and you probably know this. And I also write in this new book about the digital humanities. So this new trend, which shows us that actually even in the humanities, computer science are becoming more important than the humanities, and maybe the engineers, the software engineers, at the end take over the positions that were filled with scholars of literature before.
New era of humanitarians.
The era of humanitarians is over.
With technical skills.
Think
humanity, do technical.
Well, you have to know what you have to know what can be done. If you are clueless, you are out. If you just know what to do with programming, then you may just be you might just be functioning in the system. No? Somebody tells you program this, and you do, and you don't think. So you have to have both. And I think Snowden, who found his asylum in Russia, probably when he said, well, this is wrong, what the United States, the government does here, that he didn't get in his, this ethics, he probably didn't get in his computer classes.
Of course. It's not from special security forces, it's from his humanity. And the last question, your 3 advices for students now. What to do to become good specialist. Maybe a lot of that we talk about it, but shortly. Read books.
Well, sure, read books.
Make Facebook.
Be critical, skeptical. Also about your own use of media. So if you are hooked to your smartphone and you can't let go and think anymore, then you already have lost. You need this time when you distance. There is an interesting essay by Agamben, Contemporariness. You can find this online. And he says, in order to understand, to be a contemporary and understand the contemporary issues, I must not be immersed in it, I need distance. And only then I can see what's going on. So if you don't have any distance to your own device anymore, then how can you understand what's going on? Yeah. You need distance. That means you need to step out from time to time. That would be the advice. I'm not advising not to use Facebook, although I'm also not advising to use it, because I know people will use these new media, and they also will use Google or other search engines to get their knowledge, rather than going maybe into the library and get the book, which I find is also a valid way, but I'm not doing it. I'm getting because I'm traveling too much, I'm getting my knowledge online, so I haven't been in a library for a long time. But I would say it is important that you, at one point in your life, have spent a lot of time in the library.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Впервые в парке Зарядье 55 шедевров из собрания Государственной Третьяковской галереи, редко экспонирующиеся картины Саврасова, Левитана, Коровина, Иона, Кустодиева. Ждем вас на выставке «Изображая Россию» в парке Зарядье с 6 сентября по 6 декабря.